I've got with me Bryson DeChambeau's actual backup set of Avoda golf irons. I'm going to take you through a full range session to show you just how crazy they are. So let me give you some context about why these irons are so crazy. Now, those of you who follow golf will probably know Bryson is a one length player. So all of these irons from 5-iron down to lob wedge are exactly the same length, which is very, very unusual. And it's going to be very interesting when I get down to the 60-degree lob wedge. Playing that at 6-iron length could give me some problems. So I'm interested to see how that takes place. So to give you some context, these irons were built by Tom Bailey and Mike Shy with Avoda Golf. And they're a hollow body construction. They've been 3D printed. And one of the most interesting parts about them is they've got curved faces, and these faces progress throughout the set. So when you start with the 5-iron, we've got quite a significant amount of face progression. And as you go down through the set, they get flatter and flatter and flatter. And that's to take advantage of gear effect like we do in drivers, fairway woods, and hybrids. Now, another really interesting part about this set of irons is the grips. They are incredibly, incredibly thick. I can't give you the exact dimension now. I'll probably pop them up on the screen once I've done a little bit more research, but it's extraordinary. When I put them up against a normal grip, the visual difference is remarkable. When you put your hands on them, as I'll show you through the range session, it really is strange. So the irons themselves are hollow bodied and they come in a very upright lie angle. So those of you again who watch Bryson much will see how upright he stands with his hands very, very high. So for context, these come in around 5 degrees more upright than a standard club of 37.5 inches, which would be a 6-iron. Generally around 62 degrees lie angle. These come in at 67, so they're incredibly, incredibly upright. So I might have to make some changes to my setup to accommodate them. Shaft wise as well, I'll get into that in a moment, but I have had a little hit with them before. They are incredibly stiff. They are some of the stiffest and heaviest shafts I've ever used, these LA golf shafts. So that's enough about the sort of context of the clubs. Let's hit some. I'm going to take you through the session, give you some numbers and let you know what I think as I go. So I'm going to start with the lob wedge, and the first thing you notice when you pick this up is, well, there's two things. The grip is just extraordinary. I've probably already put up some footage of it up against kind of a normal standard size golf grip. It's really actually difficult to know where and how to put your hands on. I've got this massive gap between my tip of my fingers and my palm here, which sort of makes me feel like I'm not holding it that securely. Then when you pop it in down behind the ball, crikey, it's 60 degrees of loft. I'm used to sort of being more in that sort of position. And when you hold it at the end of the club at 6-iron length, it is really a really unusual sensation. Let's hit one away. It's a decent strike. That was better than I was expecting. So for context, my normal lob wedge would fly about 85, 90. We've got 77. That's interesting there. That's really, I thought I'd got hold of that. Let's go again. Decent strike again. They feel such hard work. I mean, they just feel so heavy. 72 yards there, and that's kind of a fairly full out lob wedge for me. That's not actually gone that far. So I wonder, from a technical point of view, when you've got so much loft and you've got so much more club head speed, which I probably have here, I'm about 3 miles an hour, 3-4 miles an hour up on my normal lob wedge club speed. Wonder if that's creating more of a glancing blow and maybe not quite getting the same oomph of impact, and I'm not quite seeing the yardage that I normally would. Someone mentioned this to me actually. If you look at Bryson's wedge play, hits a lot of wedges sort of back foot with a lot of sort of preset shaft lean. So I wonder whether that's a part of making these work, but I'm just going to sort of hit them how I normally would to get some real decent feedback. But yeah, fairly remarkable feeling at this length. Yeah, 3 decent strikes, all where I'm looking in terms of target, but again I think that's probably only gone 76. So I'm down on my sort of normal lob wedge yardage, which isn't what I was expecting. I was expecting to feel maybe the additional length would provide some extra speed and help me put it out there a bit further. I'm going to try and hit a couple of partial shots because, spoiler alert, I'm doing another video here for Golf Monthly where I'm going to go and play these in a professional event. I actually want to know what they do, so I'm going to have to hit a few of these partial lob wedges. Let's see what it's like hitting sort of a half shot, maybe choke down on it a bit for a more familiar size. That's exactly where I was looking. That's a good pitch, but I mean, these shafts feel great in terms of the quality of the LA Golf shaft, but I cannot describe how poker stiff they are. He's a big, strong boy, that Bryson. If he's getting some load into these, that is incredible. It feels like, Yeah, it feels like picking up one of the marker poles from down the range and putting a head on it and trying to move that. It's incredibly robust. Not getting much feedback here. But I am finding strike a little better than I thought I would. And again, that's a nice little pitch. These wedges are interesting actually. So as some of you might know, in Bryson's main set, I think he's been playing a Ping Glide 4.0 that's been custom made. So you have to do a lot of work to get a one length set to work, particularly if they're not designed like that to start with. So Ping have created some heads. So all of the head weights in this set, I think, off the top of my head, I think it's 275 grams, whereas a normal lob wedge, sand wedge, gap wedge, etc. would weigh a lot more than that. So Ping have obviously created some special light heads, ground a lot of weight off in certain areas for him to work that. But the wedges I've got here, these are the original wedges that were designed to go with this set that Avoda made for Bryson. So these are Avoda stamped with the BD logo. And they're actually the very low bounce option that they've made. So it's really tight. I'm playing on some tight links turf today, so that might be beneficial. But that's an interesting start with a lob wedge. Let's move up and go with the 8 iron. So we hear a lot of talk about how far Bryson hits these irons, and you see a bit of it online, sort of the loft jacking debate, and people suggesting that maybe it's a loft issue. This 8 iron comes in at 30 degrees, and those of you who know lofts at home, a standard 8 iron in a more normal set would probably be around the 37, 38 degree mark. And these clubs tend to work in about a 4 degree increment. So arguably this is probably two clubs stronger. It'd be equivalent to a fairly standard 6 iron. So that might have something to do with what you see from those, other than his strength and his conditioning and his incredible technique. That might have something to do with why you see those yardages. And for me, my standard 8 iron, generally in my set, it's about the 160 mark for me. So it'll be interesting to see how far I can get this out there. Let's get one away. That was slightly out of the toe, so it was a little bit misstruck. Even that, yeah, so that's gone 165. So that's 5 yards longer than my normal 8 iron with a pretty average strike, truth be told. Let's see if I can really crush one and see if we're going to see a proper incremental yardage gain here. That was a more compressed strike, so I'll be interested to see how far that one's gone. So an 8 iron for me, like I said, standard would be about 160. I put 179, so 180 yards basically. So that's a big old 8 iron for me. So when you hear these numbers that you're hearing from Bryson, obviously he's an incredible striker of the ball. However, yeah, that 2 clubs of extra sort of de-lofting has really helped me there. That's a big old 8 iron. I like it's quite flattering for the ego, that. But again, from a feel point of view, it's almost like a strength and conditioning session. They're so hard to move. They feel so heavy. I'm getting no sort of flexing or kicking of the shaft, no assistance. It's just really quite hard work. The heads feel great. They're so smooth, they're very soft, they come off beautifully. And a really interesting point about the first one that I hit off the toe, the bulge faces, is where gear effect comes in. So when you're striking off the toe, it's helping me start the ball a little bit further right. The ball's going to work a little bit more towards the centre, alter that spin axis, and that's exactly what I saw off that first one. It just got a little bit of a draw, so when ordinarily the face might have popped open a bit with a bit of deflection from a toe strike and stayed right, I did see that drawing back. So I'm looking forward to getting these out on the course and seeing if sort of the corrective nature of those curved faces can help me out on the golf course. I'm going to have to overcome the fact that I'm holding what feels like a cricket bat and swinging an iron bar to make that a benefit. But let's see if I can let's see how far I can pop one out. Let's hit a proper full compressed 8 iron and see what we've got. Yeah, that was good. Nice strike, dead down the target line. This is promising. I thought these would be harder than they are. 183 for an 8 iron. So that's really interesting numbers that I'm seeing here. I could get used to that from an 8 iron. It's quite flattering. Let's go all the way to the top. Let's go to the 5 iron. Now this one's a really interesting one. So we've got, again, from a 5 iron point of view, you don't see many at 17 degrees. This would be equivalent to probably a 2 iron in most sets. So most of the utility irons you see in the 2, they're around 16 to 18 degrees. This sits right in the middle of this. So again, maybe when you see those numbers on TV about Bryson hitting this 5 irons in from 250 yards, maybe there's something to it. Now, I will caveat that by saying it's going to be a shorter in length shaft than a normal 2 iron. So there'll potentially be some speed differences there from his input into the ball. but it's obviously still impressive numbers. And looking down on this, it just flat out looks like a 2-iron to me. You can really start to see the face. Obviously, as I said, up the set, the curvature really starts to come in. You can see it much less to very minimal in the wedges. Get up to this 5-iron and you can really see the curvature in the face and the bend, and it almost looks onset. It's a really incredible look. And then again, it's almost like an attack on the senses, this, because when I put the lob wedge down, it felt incredibly long. And even though this is exactly the same length, it feels incredibly short, because I feel like I'm looking at a 2-iron where I'd normally be up here in this sort of position, and I'm down in what feels like that 6-7-iron area. So even though they're all the same length, they're the same weight, they're the same swing weight, you pick up the wedge having been a normal length set player, and like I said, it feels incredibly long. Then you pick up the 5-iron / 2-iron, and it feels like you're hitting a junior club. So very interesting. Let's have a little swipe with this and see what numbers we're going to get. So my normal 5-iron in my main set will be about 200-yard carry. So it was a little bit clean, a little bit off the heel, but again, the sort of gear effect there, started left, had a little cut back there. It's very, very noticeable. That was similar to my standard 5-iron, that's about 200 yards. So the poorer strike, I don't think really did that justice. That's one thing I'm seeing here is, I think to make the most of these out on the golf course, I'm gonna have to find a way to consistently find the middle of the face, because there's so many different things at play here. The grips feel so alien in my hands. It feels sort of halfway back and at the top that I might sort of be losing control of the club, and it's almost slipping out my hands because it's so much thicker than normal. So for me to try and return that to the right area is difficult. The lie angle being so upright is it's a strange visual when you look down on it, and to get soling that out flush with the ground, which would help me get a strike, I'm not quite doing it yet. And then when you combine that with the weight setup is remarkable. So the overall static mass of these clubs is incredibly heavy. They do feel like a little barbell at the gym to lift. However, the swing weight, which would be the balance of the club, because the grips are so heavy, is actually really light. So they're coming in at about C1, C2, I think I measured them at, which is a very far stretch away from like a Rory McIlroy who'd play him at D4, or D3 would be a fairly standard swing weight on tour. So in terms of the balance about where the weight is distributed up the club, it's so strange to try and time this up and find strike. So I think when I do, I'll start to see those real distance benefits. That was a better strike from me. Again, little cutty, so it's really difficult to try and square the club face up. 223, so that's a big 5-iron from me there. That's really sort of powered out there, and it's gone really low. So because maybe I'm using less club head speed I'm generating from the 6-iron length, I'm not seeing as much club head speed into the ball. I'm not quite getting the elevation. I've got low loft, and it was kind of like this head height stinger that still carried over 220 yards. That's remarkable. So I think that's given me a good flavour of what these irons are all about. They're very, I've been told not to say interesting because I've said it too many times, but they are super interesting. So I'm really looking forward to getting out on the golf course, finding out what I can do with them. That is an amazing set of golf clubs.